The diplomatic vessel Celestial Accord drifted through the darkness of space like a silver needle threading between stars. And aboard this magnificent ship walked a young Volanthi female named Kiravel, who had made it her personal mission to make one particular human's life absolutely miserable. Her scales shimmered with colors of deep purple and ocean blue whenever light touched them, and her tail swayed behind her with the confidence of someone who believed she was better than everyone around her, especially the humans. She was barely past her adolescent molt, which meant she was practically still a child by Volanthi standards. But that did not stop her from acting like she owned every corridor she walked through. The target of her endless teasing was a man named Marcus Cole. He served as the security chief aboard the Celestial Accord, and everything about him seemed designed to annoy Kiravel in ways she could not fully explain. He was tall for a human, with broad shoulders and hands that looked like they had seen more violence than most species experienced in 10 lifetimes. A long scar ran down the left side of his face from his eyebrow to his jaw, and his right arm was not flesh at all but metal and wire, a cybernetic replacement that whirred softly whenever he moved it. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, and they held a heaviness that Kiravel found both fascinating and irritating. He never smiled, never laughed, never seemed to feel anything at all. This made him the perfect target. Kiravel found him in the weapons bay on a Tuesday morning, which was her favorite place to hunt for him because he spent so much time there, cleaning his equipment like some kind of primitive cave dweller. She draped herself over a storage crate and watched him work on his plasma rifle with the patience of someone who had nothing better to do. "Still playing with your little toys, human?" she asked in that sing-song voice she knew annoyed him. Marcus did not look up from his work, his flesh hand moving a cleaning cloth across the weapon's barrel with practiced ease. "Yes," he said simply. "My people mastered energy manipulation before your species figured out how to bang rocks together." Kiravel continued, examining her claws with exaggerated boredom. "We were building ships that could cross galaxies while humans were still living in caves and eating raw meat. Good for them." Kiravel's tail flicked with irritation at his lack of reaction, and she slid off the crate to walk closer to him, her clawed feet clicking against the metal floor. "You know what I find funny about humans?" she asked. "I suspect you will tell me regardless of my answer." "You are so fragile," she said, circling him like a predator examining prey. "One of my people can live for 300 years, and you barely make it past 80 if you are lucky. And most of you die from diseases or accidents or just falling downstairs." Marcus continued cleaning his rifle without responding. "And yet you stomp around the galaxy acting like you belong here." Kiravel laughed. "It took my species 50,000 years to earn our place among the stars. And humans showed up 500 years ago acting like you own the place. Are you finished?" Marcus asked, finally looking up at her with those gray eyes that seemed to see right through her scales and into something she did not want examined, not even close. Kiravel grinned, showing all of her sharp teeth. "I have so many more observations about your ridiculous species." But Marcus simply returned to his work, and no matter how many insults Kiravel threw at him, he absorbed them all like a black hole swallowing light. This infuriated her more than anything. Over the following days, Kiravel escalated her campaign of harassment in ways that would have made other humans explode with anger. She reprogrammed his door to play Volanthi mating calls whenever he approached it, which caused several crew members to give him very strange looks for an entire week. She told everyone in the Vayways mess hall loudly and repeatedly that humans were basically just monkeys who had figured out how to wear clothes and push buttons. She accidentally bumped into him in corridors and then loudly complained about how clumsy humans were. She questioned his intelligence, his species, his choice of career, and his taste in everything from food to music to the way he styled his hair. Through it all, Marcus remained as calm and unmovable as a mountain. "You are very boring," Kiravel told him one evening when she found him standing guard outside the ambassador's quarters. "Most humans would have tried to fight me by now, or at least yelled at me a little bit. Would that make you happy?" Marcus asked without looking at her. The question caught Kiravel off guard, and she found herself actually thinking about it for a moment before shaking her head and deciding she did not care about the answer. "It would make things more interesting," she said finally. "I have been called worse by better," Marcus replied. And there was something in his voice that Kiravel could not identify. Some deep well of experience that made her feel very young and very foolish for just a moment. But she pushed that feeling away, because she was Kiravel of the Volanthi, daughter of Ambassador Shelvera, and she would not be made to feel small by some scarred human with a metal arm, what she could not understand. What kept her awake some nights, staring at the ceiling of her quarters, was why her mother seemed to respect this human so much. Ambassador Shelvera was one of the most powerful and respected diplomats in the Volanthi government. A female who had negotiated treaties that ended wars and built alliances that spanned dozens of star systems. She did not defer to anyone, and yet when it came to Marcus Cole, something changed in her mother's behavior. When pirates threatened the shipping lanes in the outer sectors, her mother consulted Marcus before speaking with the ship's Volanthi tactical officers. When negotiations with hostile species grew tense, she positioned Marcus at her side like he was some kind of guardian spirit. When important decisions needed to be made about security matters, she listened to his opinions with a respect she rarely showed to anyone. "Why do you trust that human so much?" Kiravel demanded one evening after watching her mother spend an hour in private conversation with Marcus about some security concern. Her mother looked at her with an expression Kiravel could not read. Something complicated and layered like the depths of a very old ocean. "Because he has earned it," Shelvera said simply. "But he is just a human," Kiravel protested. "They are weak and short-lived, and they have only been part of galactic civilization for a few hundred years." "Enough," her mother said, and her voice carried an edge that Kiravel rarely heard. Sharp enough to cut through steel. "You will show him respect." "But why?" Kiravel demanded. "What has he done to deserve respect from someone like you?" Her mother's scales shifted to a darker shade, and her eyes held something that looked almost like grief, mixed with gratitude and old pain that had never fully healed. "Because he earned it in ways you cannot imagine," Shelvera said quietly. "And someday I will tell you the full story. But today is not that day." Then she turned and walked away, leaving Kiravel standing alone in the corridor, with more questions than answers and a burning curiosity that would not let her rest. There was something between her mother and the human warrior, some history that no one wanted to discuss, and Kiravel was determined to discover what it was, even if it meant she had to keep teasing Marcus Cole until he finally broke his silence and told her himself. 3 weeks passed aboard the Celestial Accord, and Kiravel had not given up her campaign against the human security chief, even for a single day, if anything. Her efforts had grown more creative and more persistent, as she searched for some way to break through that wall of calm that Marcus Cole wore like armor. She had tried everything she could think of to make him react. She had hidden his equipment and watched him search for it without complaint. Before finding backup supplies and continuing his work, she had spread rumors among the crew that humans were secretly afraid of the dark, which Marcus had ignored completely. She had challenged his authority in front of other crew members, questioned his decisions during security briefings, and even once tried to trip him in the corridor, which had failed spectacularly when he simply stepped over her extended tail. Without breaking stride, nothing worked. The human was like a stone wall that absorbed every blow without cracking. And Kiravel found herself becoming obsessed with finding some weakness she could exploit. You must have something that bothers you, she told him one afternoon in the observation deck where she had found him staring out at the stars. Everyone has something. Marcus did not turn away from the window, his reflection ghostly against the backdrop of distant galaxies and nebulae that painted the void in colors of purple and gold. Many things bother me, he said quietly. Like what? Kiravel moved to stand beside him, genuinely curious despite herself. Injustice, Marcus said after a long pause. Cruelty to those who cannot defend themselves, broken promises, and people who waste the gift of being alive. Kiravel waited for him to continue, but he fell silent again, and she realized that was all he intended to share. That is very vague, she complained. I meant something specific. Like a food you hate or a sound that annoys you, or maybe you are secretly terrified of small spaces. The corner of Marcus's mouth twitched in what might have been the beginning of a smile, but it disappeared so quickly that Kiravel could not be certain she had seen it at all. I do not like the taste of synthetic coffee, he offered. That is the most boring secret I have ever heard. I never claimed to be interesting. Kiravel made a sound of frustration and stalked away. Her tail lashing behind her with irritation, she began watching him more carefully after that conversation, studying him the way she might study an enemy before battle. She noticed things she had missed before in her eagerness to mock and tease. She noticed how he checked every corridor before walking through it, how his eyes swept rooms for threats that existed only in his memory. She noticed how he flinched at sudden loud noises. Just a tiny movement that most people would never catch. But Kiravel had excellent vision. She noticed how he never sat with his back to a door, how he always knew where the exits were, how he moved through the ship like someone who expected violence to find him at any moment. She noticed the nightmares. Her quarters were on the same deck as his, separated by several rooms, but close enough that she could hear muffled sounds through the walls. If she listened carefully, some nights she heard him cry out in his sleep, words in human languages she did not understand, sounds of pain and fear and rage that did not match the calm man she saw during the day. She told herself she did not care about his nightmares or his pain or wherever ghosts haunted him when he closed his eyes. She told herself he was just a human, fragile and temporary, not worth her concern or curiosity. But the questions would not leave her alone. One evening she found her mother in her private study, surrounded by holographic displays showing diplomatic reports and intelligence briefings. Mother, Kiravel said, settling into a chair across from her. I want to know about Marcus Cole. Shelvera's scales rippled with an emotion Kiravel could not name, and she slowly deactivated the displays until they sat in comfortable dimness with only the stars visible through the viewport. What do you want to know? Her mother asked carefully. Everything, Kiravel said. I want to know why you trust him so much, why you treat him differently than every other human on this ship, why he has nightmares that wake me up 3 decks away. Her mother was silent for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was softer than Kiravel had ever heard it. Some stories are not mine to tell, Shelvera said, and some truths are not ready to be spoken. That is not an answer. No, it is not, her mother agreed, but it is all I can give you right now. Kiravel leaned forward, her claws digging into the arms of her chair with frustration. I am not a child anymore, Mother. I deserve to know what secret you and that human share. Something flickered in Shelvera's eyes, and for a moment she looked like she might finally reveal whatever truth she had been hiding, but then she shook her head, and her expression closed off like a door slamming shut. You are still very young, Kiravel, even if you do not believe it, her mother said. And there are things about the universe that you are not ready to understand yet. Try me. No, Shelvera said firmly. When the time is right, you will learn everything. But that time is not now. Kiravel wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers, wanted to shake her mother until the secrets came tumbling out, but something in Shelvera's expression stopped her. Something that looked almost like fear, mixed with a fierce protective instinct that Kiravel had never seen directed at her before she left her mother's study without another word. More confused than ever, that night she found herself wandering the ship's corridors, long after most of the crew had gone to sleep. Her mind churning with questions that had no answers, she passed by the training room and stopped when she heard sounds coming from inside. The unmistakable rhythm of someone hitting something over and over again. Through the window she saw Marcus Cole attacking a training dummy with his bare hands. His movements fast and brutal, and nothing like the calm security. Chief, she thought she knew. Sweat poured down his face and soaked through his shirt. And his flesh hand was bleeding from where his knuckles had split open against the dummy's surface. But he did not stop. He hit the dummy again and again. And Kiravel realized with a shock that he was crying, tears streaming down his scarred face while his fists continued their relentless assault. She watched him for several minutes, frozen in place by the raw emotion she was witnessing. This was not the unbreakable wall she had been trying to crack. This was a man held together by nothing more than willpower and duty, fighting demons that she could not see but could sense in every desperate blow. When Marcus finally stopped, his chest heaving and his hands dripping blood onto the floor, Kiravel slipped away before he could notice her. She returned to her quarters and lay awake until morning, thinking about scars both visible and invisible, about secrets that parents kept from their children, and about a human warrior who fought his battles alone in empty rooms, where no one could see him break for the first time since she had met Marcus Cole. Kiravel felt something other than amusement or contempt when she thought about him. She felt something that might have been respect, or maybe it was just the beginning of understanding. Either way, she knew that teasing him did not feel as fun as it used to, and she was not entirely sure what to do with that realization. The universe had become more complicated than she wanted it to be. And somewhere in that complication was a truth that everyone seemed determined to keep from her. But Kiravel was patient. She would find out eventually. One way or another, she always did. The attack came without warning on a night when the stars seemed peaceful and the ship hummed with the quiet contentment of a vessel far from danger. Kiravel had been sleeping in her quarters, dreaming of home and the warm oceans of her birth world, when the first explosion tore through her dreams and threw her from her bed onto the cold metal floor. Alarms screamed through the ship like wounded animals, red emergency lights painting everything in shades of blood and shadow. She scrambled to her feet, her scales instinctively shifting to darker colors that would help her blend into shadows, a survival instinct inherited from ancestors who had hunted in deep ocean trenches. Another explosion rocked the ship, and Kiravel grabbed the wall to keep from falling as the artificial gravity flickered and stabilized. Her heart pounded against her ribs with enough force that she could hear it over the alarms. And for the first time in her young life, she felt true fear clawing at the edges of her mind. The door to her quarters slid open, and she stepped into a corridor filled with smoke and chaos. Crew members ran past her in both directions, some heading toward battle stations and others fleeing from something Kiravel could not yet see. What is happening? She grabbed a passing engineer by the arm. "Raiders," the engineer gasped, his face pale with terror. "Kathmari Raiders. They have breached the hull on decks 7 and 8. The name hit Kiravel like a physical blow. The Kathmari were nightmare creatures from the edges of civilized space. Insectoid monsters who lived only to raid and kill and feast on the flesh of other species. They did not negotiate, did not take prisoners, did not show mercy to anyone regardless of age or species or importance. They simply killed everything in their path and moved on to the next target. "Where is my mother?" Kiravel demanded. The ambassador was taken to the secure room on deck 4. the engineer said before pulling free and running toward whatever destination seemed safer than where they stood. Kiravel turned to head toward Deck 4. But the corridor in that direction was already filling with smoke, so thick she could barely see 3 feet in front of her face. She changed direction, heading for an alternate route through the maintenance corridors that she had discovered. During her many explorations of the ship, the sounds of fighting grew louder as she moved. Screams and weapons fire and the horrible clicking language of the Kethmari echoing through the metal walls. She rounded a corner and stopped so suddenly that her claws scraped grooves in the floor. A Kethmari warrior stood at the end of the corridor. 8 feet of black chitin and bladed limbs and multifaceted eyes that reflected the emergency lights like 1,000 tiny fires. It saw her at the same moment she saw it, and its mandibles spread wide in what might have been hunger or excitement, or both. Kiravel tried to run, but her legs would not obey her commands. She tried to scream, but her voice had abandoned her, along with her courage. The Kethmari began moving toward her with the horrible skittering speed of its species, venom dripping from its mandibles and leaving smoking holes in the floor wherever it landed. "This is how I die," Kiravel thought with a clarity that surprised her. She would never see her home world again, never swim in the warm oceans of her childhood, never discover the secrets her mother had been keeping from her. She closed her eyes and waited for the end, but the end did not come. Instead, she heard a sound like thunder in an enclosed space. And when she opened her eyes, the Kethmari was falling backward with a massive hole in its thorax. Marcus Cole stepped past her with his plasma rifle still smoking, and he did not pause even for a moment before firing again at a second Kethmari that had appeared behind the first. The creature dodged the shot and lunged at Marcus with bladed arms extended, moving faster than anything that Sai should have been able to move. What happened next would stay with Kiravel for the rest of her life. She had teased Marcus about being a primitive human, about being slow and weak and fragile compared to other species. She had been completely and absolutely wrong. Marcus dropped his rifle and met the Kethmari's charge with his cybernetic arm, catching one of its bladed limbs before it could strike. The metal fingers of his artificial hand crushed through chitin like it was made of paper. And while the creature screamed in pain, Marcus drove a combat knife up through its thorax with his flesh hand in a single, brutal motion. The Kethmari collapsed, and Marcus was already moving before its body hit the ground. 2 more raiders appeared from a side corridor, and Marcus flowed toward them like water seeking the path of least resistance. He ducked under a slashing blade, pivoted around a snapping mandible, and killed both creatures in movements so fast and efficient that Kiravel's eyes could barely track them. A third Kethmari managed to land a hit, its bladed arm slicing across Marcus's ribs and painting the wall with human blood. He did not slow down. A fourth creature drove a venomous spine through his shoulder from behind, and Kiravel screamed a warning that came too late. Marcus turned and killed that one too, ripping the spine from his own flesh with his cybernetic hand before using it to stab the next attacker. More Kethmari came. Drawn by the sounds of battle and the smell of blood, Marcus killed them all. He fought like nothing Kiravel had ever seen, like nothing she had ever imagined a human could be capable of. Every movement was precise and deadly. Every blow landed exactly where it needed to land. Every attack flowed seamlessly into the next, like he was performing a dance he had practiced for 1,000 years. He took more wounds as the battle continued, cuts and slashes and punctures that would have killed most other species 3 times over, but he did not stop. He could not stop, because Kiravel stood behind him frozen with fear. And if he fell, she would die. When the last Kethmari finally collapsed in a heap of shattered chitin and leaking fluids, Marcus stood among the bodies like a statue carved from blood and determination. His breath came in ragged gasps, and the venom from the spine wound was already spreading through his system. darkening the veins visible through his torn shirt. He turned to face Caravel, and his storm-gray eyes found hers with an intensity that cut through her shock. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice steady despite everything. Caravel could only shake her head, still unable to speak or move or do anything except stare at the human who had just saved her life in ways she could never have imagined. "Good," Marcus said, and something that might have been relief flickered across his scarred face before pain replaced it. He stumbled and caught himself against the wall, his cybernetic arm whirring as it took his weight. "Get your mother," he said, his voice growing weaker as the venom did its work. "Tell her Section 7 is clear. Tell her, I'm sorry I could not make it to her position. You are dying." Caravel finally managed to say, "Maybe," Marcus admitted. "But not yet, not until I know you are safe." He slid down the wall, leaving a smear of blood on the metal surface, and his eyes began to lose focus. "Go," he said. "Your mother needs to know you are alive. She has already lost too much. She cannot lose you too." Caravel did not understand what he meant, but she finally found the strength to move. She ran through the ship faster than she had ever run before. And when she found her mother in the secure room surrounded by guards and other survivors, she collapsed into her arms and sobbed like the child she had always pretended not to be. "Marcus," she gasped between tears. "Section 7, he saved me. He's dying. We have to help him." Her mother's face went pale, and she barked orders that sent medical teams racing through the ship. Then she held Caravel close and whispered words that did not make sense. Words about debts and promises and a bond that Caravel did not understand. "It will be all right," Shelvera said. "Marcus is strong, stronger than anyone I have ever known. And he has too much left to do to die today." Caravel wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that the bleeding human who had stood between her and death would somehow survive the poison flowing through his veins, but she had seen his wounds, had seen how much blood he had lost, had seen the way his eyes had dimmed as the venom spread for the first time in her life. Caravel prayed to gods she had never truly believed in, and she promised them anything they wanted if they would just let Marcus Cole live. 6 hours passed while Caravel sat outside the medical bay doors, and she refused to move even when crew members offered her food or water or a comfortable place to rest. The ship had been secured, the remaining Kethmari raiders killed or driven back to their own vessels, and the Celestial Accord was now limping toward the nearest starbase for repairs. But none of that mattered to Caravel. That mattered was the human lying on the other side of those doors. The human who had almost died protecting her. The human she had spent months tormenting for no reason other than her own childish amusement. She thought about all the cruel things she had said to him, all the pranks she had played, all the times she had mocked his species and questioned his worth. She thought about how he had never once responded with anger or cruelty, how he had absorbed her hatred like it was nothing more than rain falling on stone. She thought about the way he had fought, the way he had placed himself between her and death without hesitation, the way he had kept fighting even when his body was failing him. Guilt sat in her stomach like a stone, heavy and cold and impossible to ignore. "You should rest," a passing medic told her gently. "I am fine," Caravel said without looking up. "The human is stable," the medic continued. "Our doctors and the human medical staff have been working together, and they managed to neutralize the venom before it reached his vital organs." Relief flooded through Caravel so powerfully that she felt dizzy, and she had to press her back against the wall to keep from falling over. "He will live?" she asked. "He will live," the medic confirmed. "Humans are remarkably difficult to kill. Apparently, their species evolved on a world so dangerous that their bodies developed incredible abilities to heal from injuries that would kill most other species." The medic moved on, and Caravel stayed where she was, processing this information and feeling emotions she did not know how to name. her mother found her there an hour later, still sitting against a wall with her tail curled around her legs, like she was trying to make herself as small as possible. Shelver looked exhausted, her scales dull with stress and her eyes heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. But when she saw Kiravel, something softened in her expression, and she lowered herself to sit beside her daughter on the cold floor. "He's going to recover," Shelvera said quietly. "I know," Kiravel whispered. "The medic told me." They sat in silence for a long moment, mother and daughter sharing space in a way they had not done since Kiravel was very young. "Why did he do it?" Kiravel finally asked. "I have been nothing but cruel to him since he came aboard. I have mocked him and insulted him and made his life miserable. And he almost died saving me." Her mother was quiet for so long that Kiravel thought she might not answer. Then Shelvera let out a breath that seemed to carry the weight of years. And when she spoke, her voice trembled with emotions that Kiravel had never heard before. "There is something I should have told you long ago," her mother said. "Something I was perhaps too afraid to explain. Too worried about how it might change things between us." Kiravel turned to look at her mother, and she saw tears forming in the corners of Shelvera's. "You know that your father died before you hatched," her mother continued. "I have told you that much, that he was killed in an attack, and that you never had the chance to know him." "Yes," Kiravel said carefully, sensing that something important was coming. "What I never told you was how it happened, or who saved us when everything seemed lost." Shelvera's claws clicked together nervously, a habit Kiravel had never seen from her unshakable mother. 15 cycles ago, I was traveling on a diplomatic convoy through to space," her mother said. "I was pregnant with you, barely able to move quickly, certainly not able to fight. Your father was with me, protecting me as he always did." She paused, gathering strength to continue. "We were ambushed by slavers, pirates who captured people and sold them to the highest bidder. They killed your father in the first attack, cut him down while he was trying to protect me." Kiravel felt her heart clench at words she had never heard before. Details about her father's death that her mother had kept hidden all these years. The Volanti guards fell within minutes. Shelvera continued. "I was captured along with a dozen others, and we all knew what was coming. We would be sold, separated, broken into obedient slaves for whoever was willing to pay." Tears were flowing freely down her mother's face now, and Kiravel reached out to take her hand without thinking. "A human mercenary ship picked up our distress signal," her mother said. "They were outnumbered by the slavers, outgunned. They had no reason to risk their lives for a group of strangers from a species that often looked down on them." She squeezed Kiravel's hand tightly. "They came anyway." Kiravel felt something cold settle in her chest as understanding began to dawn. Marcus Cole led the boarding party. "Himself," her mother said. "He was younger then, not yet carrying all the scars you see now, but he fought like something out of legend. He and his crew carved through the slavers like they were nothing." Shelvera's voice broke, and she had to take a moment to compose herself before continuing. "He lost his arm saving us. A slaver cut it off while Marcus was shielding me from an explosion. And he kept fighting anyway, kept killing anyone who tried to hurt us. Kept going until every single slaver was dead." "His arm," Kiravel whispered, looking down at her own hands and remembering the cybernetic limb that she had mocked so many times. "Half his crew died in that rescue," her mother said. "Good people, friends of his. They died so that strangers could live, so that you could have a chance to be born." The weight of this truth pressed down on Kiravel until she felt like she might shatter. In Volanti tradition, when someone preserves a clutch at great personal cost, they earn the right of Velmarak, her mother continued. "It is an old custom, older than our civilization, a recognition that some debts cannot be repaid with words or wealth." Kiravel knew the word. had learned about it in her cultural studies as a child, but she had never thought it would apply to her own life. Spiritual parentage. She breathed. Yes, her mother confirmed. Marcus refused the title for years, said he did not deserve it, said he was just doing what anyone would have done. But our laws do not care about modesty or denial. She turned to face Kiravel directly, taking both of her hands in her own, by the oldest traditions of our people. Marcus Cole is your parent, Shelvera said. As much as I am, as much as your bloodfather was. He has a claim on you that nothing can erase. Kiravel felt the world tilt around her as everything she thought she knew rearranged itself into a new pattern. The human she had tormented, the warrior she had mocked, the man who had nearly died to save her life. He was family. He had always been family, and she had treated him like dirt beneath her claws. He never said anything, Kiravel whispered. He never told me, never tried to make me respect him, never used it against me. That is who he is, her mother said softly. He does not believe he deserves recognition for doing what he thinks is right. He saved us because we needed saving, not because he wanted anything in return. Kiravel thought about all the times Marcus had endured her cruelty in silence. All the times he could have revealed the truth and demanded the respect he was owed. All the times he had simply accepted her abuse without complaint. And she understood, finally, what true strength looked like. It was not in fighting or killing or surviving impossible odds. It was in giving everything you had for people who might never appreciate it, and expecting nothing in return. I need to see him, Kiravel said, rising to her feet with a determination she had never felt before. Her mother nodded and stood beside her, and together they walked toward the medical bay where Marcus Cole lay recovering from wounds he had earned protecting a child who had never deserved his sacrifice. But Kiravel was determined to change that. Starting today, starting right now, she would become someone worthy of the gift she had been given, someone worthy of being his daughter. 3 days after the attack, when the doctors finally allowed visitors, Kiravel walked into the medical bay with her heart pounding so hard she was certain everyone could hear it. Marcus lay propped up on pillows, looking smaller somehow in the hospital bed, surrounded by monitors that beeped and hummed with the rhythm of his recovery. His face was pale, and dark circles hung beneath his eyes. The way he looked up at her entrance, those storm gray eyes were alert and aware. He did not seem surprised to see her. Kiravel, he said simply, and there was no accusation in his voice, no anger, no demand for apology. She had prepared a speech during the long hours she had spent waiting outside these doors, a grand declaration of regret and gratitude and newfound understanding. But standing here, looking at the man who had sacrificed so much for her without ever asking for recognition, all those carefully prepared words fled from her mind. She walked to the chair beside his bed and sat down. Without speaking, Marcus watched her for a moment, then returned to the datapad he had been reading. As if her presence was the most natural thing in the world, they stayed like that for an hour, sharing space in comfortable silence. I did not know, Kiravel finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I know, Marcus replied without looking up. I was horrible to you. You were young, he said, testing boundaries, trying to find your place in the universe. It is normal. For humans, maybe, Kiravel said, echoing words she had spoken to him before, but with entirely different meaning. Now a ghost of a smile crossed his scarred face. There and gone so quickly, she might have imagined it. For everyone, I think, he said. My daughter was the same way when she was your age. Kiravel's head snapped up so fast her neck ached. You have a daughter? The smile faded from Marcus's face, replaced by something so heavy and sad that Kiravel wished she had not asked. Had, he said quietly. She was on one of the colony worlds when the Frontier Wars started. I was deployed on the other side of the sector when the attacks began. He paused. and his cybernetic hand clenched into a fist against the bedsheet. "I could not get there in time," he continued, his voice rough with old grief. "By the time my ship arrived, the colony was gone. Everyone was gone. My wife, my daughter, everyone I had ever loved." Kiravel felt tears forming in her eyes as the weight of his words settled over her. This man had lost everything. His arm, his crew, his family, his entire world, and then years later, he had nearly died again to save someone else's child. Someone who had repaid his sacrifice with mockery and cruelty. "I do not deserve your protection," she whispered. Shame burning through her like fire. Marcus set down his datapad and looked at her directly for the first time since she had entered the room. "That is not how it works," he said, and his voice carried a certainty that left no room for argument. "You do not earn protection. You do not deserve it or not deserve it. You are alive. That is enough." His cybernetic hand flexed unconsciously, the metal fingers catching light from the medical bay's fixtures. "It is always enough," he said. Kiravel felt something shift inside her. Some wall she had not known she had built beginning to crumble and fall away. She had spent her whole life trying to prove she was better than everyone around her, that her species was superior, that her position as the ambassador's daughter made her special and important. But sitting here with Marcus, she understood for the first time that none of that mattered. What mattered was what you did when someone needed you, what you sacrificed when the universe demanded a price, what you gave without expecting anything in return. "Will you teach me?" she asked suddenly, the words coming out before she could stop them. Marcus raised an eyebrow in question. "How to fight like you do," she clarified. "How to protect people. How to be the kind of person who runs toward danger instead of away from it." He studied her for a long moment, and Kiravel felt like he was looking past her scales and her youth and her mistakes, seeing something deeper that even she did not know existed. "It is not about fighting," he said finally. "The fighting is just a tool, a way to express something more important. What is it about then?" "It is about deciding what matters," Marcus said, "and then not stopping, ever, no matter what it costs. No matter how much it hurts, no matter how many times you fail." He shifted in the bed, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at his healing wounds. "Your mother has it too," he continued. "That fire, that refusal to quit. It is why she has survived this long in galactic politics. It is why she was able to keep going after she lost your father." "Is that a human thing?" Kiravel asked. "It is a person thing," Marcus replied. "Every species has individuals who carry that fire, and every species has individuals who let it go out. Species does not matter. Age does not matter. What matters is what you choose to do when the universe gives you a reason to give up." Kiravel considered this for a long moment, turning the words over in her mind like precious stones. Then slowly, carefully, she extended her hand in the human gesture she had seen crew members exchange, the one that meant greeting and respect and the beginning of something new. "I am Kiravel," she said. "I do not think we have been properly introduced." Marcus looked at her outstretched hand, and something changed in his eyes. Something warm and alive, replacing the careful distance he had maintained since they met. He clasped her hand with his flesh and blood one, his grip warm and steady and strong. "Marcus Cole," he said. "It is good to finally meet you over the following weeks." As Marcus recovered and the ship made its slow journey to the starbase, everything changed between them. Kiravel spent hours at his side, listening to stories of his past, learning about the wars he had fought and the people he had lost and the reasons he kept going despite everything. He taught her about humans, not the simplified version she had learned in her studies, but the real truth of a species that had clawed its way to the stars through sheer, stubborn refusal to accept limitations. He told her about human history, about the wars and disasters and mistakes that should have destroyed them 1,000 times over. and about the way they kept getting back up, no matter how many times they were knocked down, and slowly, tentatively, he began to teach her how to fight, not just the physical movements, though those came too, but the mindset behind them, the philosophy of protection that drove everything he did. "You do not fight to win," he told her during one of their sessions. "You fight so that someone else does not have to." Years passed as Kiravel grew from an adolescent into a young adult, and then into a respected officer in the Interstellar Coalition fleet. She earned her rank through hard work and dedication and a willingness to put herself in danger for others that reminded everyone who knew her of a certain human warrior. And through it all, Marcus stood beside her when she received her first command. He was there in the front row of the ceremony when she faced her first real battle. He was at her side offering calm advice and steady support when she lost soldiers under her command and thought she could not continue. He held her while she cried and reminded her that grief was the price of caring. When reporters asked about the Grain human who served as her chief advisor, the scarred veteran who stood at her side during every major battle and diplomatic crisis, Kiravel always gave the same answer. "He's family," she said simply, and Marcus Cole, the human warrior who had twice saved her life and never once asked for gratitude, would smile his quiet smile and say nothing at all, because some debts are not paid with words. They are paid with a lifetime of standing watch, of being there when it matters, of choosing every single day to protect the people you love. And Marcus had made that choice 15 years ago in a cargo hold full of slavers, when he had looked at a terrified pregnant Volante and decided that her life and the life of her unborn child were worth any price. He had been paying that debt forward ever since, and now Kiravel was doing the same, passing on the gift that had been given to her to everyone she could reach. That was what family meant. That was what humanity had taught her, and she would spend the rest of her life making sure she was worthy of both.